Hi, friends. Welcome to Charlie and Steve Watch Stuff, where today we are watching Moonlight. My name's Steve Selnick, and joining me, as always, he just got done whipping up the chef special. It's my good friend, Charlie Peppers.
I'm so happy to be talking about this damn film. Before I forget, really fun fact from Barry Jenkins, the director of this film. Whenever someone is feeding Chiron, the main character, it's to show a shift in the relationship, because giving someone food is akin to showing them affection and intimacy. So in the final chapter, when we show, I'm not going to ruin it by saying that character's name, when we show that character preparing a meal for him, the director very intentionally showed the steps of him putting tenderness and care into each step of it, because it was just, him really wanting to be tender and gentle with them. So I found that interesting.
Oh, incredible. I didn't even think about that. That's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. And I think that is a perfect jumping off point for the place I want to start in this podcast. We're coming in with Hot Take Central right now. And Charlie, this is the first time I've watched this movie. And I'm going to show my hand a little bit for what our ratings are going to be at the end of the episode today. But my question for you, why are people who think that La La Land is better than Moonlight wrong? Why are they so wrong it hurts inside? Because this movie was so good, and it made La La Land look like...
It made it look like spaghetti art or macaroni art. You know what? It's insane. Okay,
it's insane.
I'm going to say two different pieces of this, because I'm not going to lie. I watched the La La Land and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it because I enjoy musicals.
Sure.
And I enjoy Ryan Gosling. I enjoy Emma Stone. And I enjoy the gentleman who directed it. I also really loved Whiplash, which he also directed. So it's a great piece of art.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to speak about it from a cultural perspective, and I'm going to speak about it from a purely technical, cinematic standpoint. I think that technically La La Land is a feat. The musical numbers, particularly them stuck in traffic and them coming out and dancing on their cars, them at the observatorium, the sheer joy that oozes out of that movie and its love for the form of musicals is very dear to my heart. But at the same time, culturally, I think it was very tone deaf to not only have a movie about the movie industry and something that is just so white overshadow a movie like Moonlight. Mm. I think that was very tone deaf given the socioeconomics of the country and the fact that movies like Moonlight, particularly at the level that Moonlight was being produced and made, it's such a rare gem to then throw La La Land in the same sentence just makes you go, what? They both are great films, but what one of them is saying, I think, is more tapped into the world than what the other one is saying, which has been said many, many times, which is that we love watching pretty white people in musicals dancing and falling in love with each other, played by movie stars like Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone. While I still love those actors and I love that movie, it's well made, but the love that I have for La La Land does not compare to the love that I have for Moonlight. What are your thoughts, Steve?
I think that Moonlight wrote circles around La La Land, and it's not even close. I think everyone in Moonlight acted circles around everyone in La La Land, even though both of those things are extremely good. Yes, I hear you on the joy and the production value, and they shut down an entire section of the freeway in Los Angeles, which is basically stopping half of the world if you would talk to anybody in Los Angeles to make that movie. All really, really huge feats. But yeah, I mean, this one just grabbed me and didn't let me go for almost 2 hours, which I wholly appreciate. And it's important for cultural representation for people that identify as the same way as you and look the way that you do. And it's also important cultural representation for people that look and identify the way that I do, because they need to see and hear these stories and take them in and think about them for days afterwards and hopefully be changed a little bit by it for the better. And that's the mark of good art more than anything else to me. So, and it really was a sort of a David and Goliath sort of a battle. And I think that's how it was being referenced back in the day. This movie's budget was $1.5 million. It was released and distributed by A24. When it was released, it was the second lowest grossing film domestically behind The Hurt Locker to win the Oscar for Best Picture. So this is like a small movie that managed to get over the hump and take home a couple of those awards. And so we're here to talk about and celebrate Moonlight during this Pride Month celebration that we're doing this month. Charlie, anything else you want to cover about just the overall Moonlight picture before we dive into the film itself?
The smug glee that I had in my heart when La La Land was announced as Best Picture. Then they were like, oh, actually, Moonlight, you won Best Picture. Moonlight, you won. There's been a mistake. Oh.
Oh, shit. I forgot that was that Oscars.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. Oh, wow. Yeah, it was the envelope one, right?
I was just like...
That's... To call back, that's the moment where Jean Grey's going, watch this. Watch this. No, watch this.
I could have caught Rogue from dropping him, but I didn't.
Hell yeah. We're going to talk about Moonlight today, released on October 21st, 2016. This was directed and written by Barry Jenkins and explores a coming-of-age story of a boy, Chiron, in his childhood, adolescence, and early adult life. It explores the difficulties he faces with his sexuality and identity, including the physical and emotional abuse that he endures growing up. Now, before we talk about the main character itself, we're going to start with the opening of the movie and the setting that we're dropped into, which is Liberty City, Miami, a section of Miami at the height of the crack epidemic. And the first person that we actually see is Juan, who's played by Mahershala Ali. He took home an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor for this role, which just 100% deserved. I was actually surprised at how little he was in the film for him taking home that award. I thought I was going to see him a little bit more, but we can get to that later. And he rolls up with the song Every N-Word is a Star by Boris Gardner playing on the radio. And you kind of get put into the time with his car, his ride, the music, the area around him. And so, Charlie, I know you wanted to talk about this sort of scene setting with the use of music and sort of the string that the music plays throughout this film. So I'm gonna let you jump in here and talk about it.
Yeah, Steve, before I get into that, I almost want to throw it back to you for a second because you made me aware that this was sampled in a Kendrick Lamar song, right?
Oh, right. Yes, we did talk about that. It's sampled in the beginning of his album, To Pimp a Butterfly. It's how the album actually starts. It's just that line of the song, Every N-Word is a Star, said over, like looped over and over again until it goes into his first song of the album. And To Pimp a Butterfly is, I mean, that was his whole like racial justice, racial reckoning album where he did songs like I and All Right and stuff like that.
100%, 110%. I love that song as an opening for this film because this film is really a character study on Black masculinity in the United States of America within this particular juncture of time during the crack epidemic, which I find to be a very interesting point for this film to start off at because crack shattered many communities, it shattered many families, it is a crippling addiction to have, both mentally, spiritually, financially, and the ripple effect of it is still being felt generations from now. It definitely deepens an intergenerational trauma that's already inherent in Black communities. So I like that needle drop. I thought it was really smart.
Agree. And then it cuts immediately to Chiron running away from some bullies, going by the nickname Little, hiding from them in an empty crack house that he's able to open up and lock and spend some time in. To your point that you said at the beginning of the podcast, Juan is the first person to feed Chiron, so he's able to extend that care, show that care through getting him some food at the diner. He can't quite break through to him right away. He decides to bring him back to his house, introduces him to his girlfriend, Teresa, who I was like, this woman looks so familiar. Who is this? And I'm like, oh, it's Janelle Monáe. It's just Janelle Monáe coming from the top roads doing their thing. They let him spend the night. He gets a good night's sleep on a real bed. Juan brings him back to the house. His mother, Paula, is upset that he didn't come back. Seems like a hardworking nurse who just doesn't have the time for her son. Also, don't know if you connected this bridge. She's the woman in Pirates of the Caribbean. That's like the witch woman in the second and third movies. That's the woman who plays the Chiron's mom in that movie.
That's where you know her from. All right, so
I was like, this is who this is.
Cast with you because we're coming from two different places culturally. That actress is an absolute icon. Have you ever seen Set It Off?
Oh, it's been a minute since I've seen Set It Off.
Do you remember the basic plot of Set It Off?
Is it a dance movie?
No. That's not Step Up.
That's not Step Up.
Is a black female bank robbery movie.
Oh shit! That I haven't seen Set It Off.
Yeah,
I'm immediately in the
Set It Off. At certain point, this actress, I really want her to start getting more of her flowers because she plays one of the female bank robbers, and I would say that she's the heart of that movie. And that movie has some heavy hitters. Queen Latifah's in it. Jada Pinkett Smith is in it. Kimberly Elise is in it. And
let's go.
Who else is it? Vivica A. Fox is in it as well. And it's a very,
oh my God,
it's a very what I would call like black movie. Like everybody in the black movie knows Set It Off. Like especially if you hear the song "What's It Gonna Be" from En Vogue. It's like such a staple of the black community.
I'm in.
But yes, and Pirates of the Caribbean is also fucking fire. My problems with Johnny Depp aside, because it's not just Amber Heard who is very questionable and did some fuck shit. It's also Johnny Depp who did some fuck shit. I digress.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say that Pirates of the Caribbean is a staple of the white community, and I wasn't going to argue.
Pirates of the Caribbean is the white people Set It Off.
I mean, there might be more parallels there than we think. Anyhow.
Go ahead.
Not though. After Juan is able to find Chiron's way back home and get him back to his mother, they continue to spend time together, and you see this, this fatherly bond form between them. Ironically, we're recording this on Father's Day when we're talking about the fact that this is the person that Chiron was able to find a father figure in. And the one scene I want to park on right here is the scene where Juan takes Chiron to the ocean and teaches him how to swim. I think that this was just it's something that never would have happened to him if they hadn't met each other. He never would have had this opportunity to do this thing that we never see him do again, but at least he got to have a moment where he got to be a kid. I think something that we see more and more often throughout the beginning of this movie is how much of a childhood Little didn't get to have. And this is one of the few moments where he actually did seem to get one, or that scene where they take a little bit longer of showing him comfortable in a bed. Like you quickly understand that this is not normal life for him to be comfortable, to be held, to be seen, to be... I think it also pushes back on stereotypes. Like a common stupid joke that you hear is that black people can't swim. And it's just like, no, they can. They're just fucking humans. And they go out to the ocean and they learn how to swim just like everybody else. And so I think this was a really important scene to set up that relationship and sort of the trajectory that Little is about to go on. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think this is a great scene. I think, well, actually, I'm going to work my way backwards. I'll come back to the scene because you said something else that I thought was really interesting. I like the scene of Mahershala Ali's character finding Little in the crack house. And I like that he was the person to let the light in to that dark space, because that's what he did with the relationship, poured light into Little's world, because he's the first person to see Little and to make Little feel like he could take up space. And I like the name Little for him as a nickname because it's both endearing and it's also infantilizing and suggesting that for him to be anything other than small would be criminal and would make people wildly uncomfortable. So I love that moment of the film. I love the way it's shot. I also felt very terrified for him watching those boys chase him like that. And This movie made me tear up and almost cry a couple of times because it made me reflect on my childhood. I have an interesting relationship with being bullied. I've never been bullied the extent of getting physically hit or something happening to me, because I think, and I don't know why, maybe that was just the way things worked out, or maybe the story that I tell myself is that I had enough wherewithal to know who to avoid and who to move away from, because I was also queer, in addition to being little and being smaller of stature. But I've never been chased by that many boys, at least not in a violent context. It's so harrowing to see the opening of the movie show that character going through that, especially with who he turns out to be. And then moving on to the scene where he's in the house with our girl, Janelle Monáe, and this made me fall in love with her as an actress all over again because of how she interacts with the child actor. You could just see her fully present and fully in the scene, both of them. That's why I love adult actors acting with kids, because I didn't see anyone in that scene acting. They literally, I could tell in their faces, they were just curious about what this kid was going to do with his performance. That dinner scene with them is probably one of my favorite scenes in the movie. Steve, what did you think about it?
Man, I mean, it was put it in line with all the other wonderful things that this film did. The way that they left space for him to talk whenever he felt like it, and to just make sure he was fed and safe, and all the other stuff. I just think it shows a care that I think had never received in his life, and it's almost, we're getting used to it as much as he's getting used to it on the screen, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense. It makes total sense. Speaking of care, when we do go to his mom, I love that we aren't revealed to her disease first. I love that we're exposed to what I believe is her true self. And her true self is a mom who cares for her son. This was a very, right? A testament to the writing. She does. It is always clear to me that she loves her son. It's always clear, but it's suppressed and other dark shit gets in the way. The fact that she's well put together, she's dressed, her hair and her makeup are tight, and she says, oh, no, TV privileges are revoked. Go read a book. You can't do this. You got to let me know where you are. But also, or the fact that she wasn't more panicked also says a lot. My mom would have been a fucking wreck. My mom would have murdered me if I showed up the next day and she didn't know where I was. So in hindsight, this scene is really interesting.
Yeah.
Steve, what would your mom have done to you if you, at that age, just showed up the next day like, oh, hi?
At that age, the whole state would have been activated. Right? Yeah, I mean, again, we're talking about cultural differences. You're talking about a missing white kid in suburban Connecticut. It's a different experience. Yeah, but but not to negate any other experience of someone that doesn't have those sort of resources or cultural energy behind them to be found. The experience of the mother in that situation should usually be very similar. I think if you go back and think about it, it probably means that she spent the night fucked up and woke up and realized that her son wasn't there.
Right.
And she's probably still, you do see her deterioration, her physical deterioration throughout the film. So I think maybe at this point, I think she was wearing scrubs, so it seemed like she was coming back from work, wherever she was working. And so maybe she was still holding a job at that point. At some point, we see that she doesn't have a job anymore. And so I think it's a balance of, I think she's in the early stage of her drug use where you still get to see some of that real self come through, and then it deteriorates from there. But yeah, I agree with you. I think it was, and it makes the reveal later on as we get to the end of the little section all the more heartbreaking when we see that it's her in the car. But we'll get to that section soon. Was there anything else you wanted to say about what we were talking about before we move on to the first scene with Kevin?
Scene in the ocean. That was beautiful just because of Black people's experience in the ocean, particularly with slave ships. And a lot of people drowning
Yes.
in slave ships or jumping off because they'd rather die, and a lot of pregnant women jumping off slave ships. So you have people who weren't born. But I always think that Black people particularly have a very interesting relationship with the water, myself included, because I like to say I know how to swim. I've taken swimming classes, but I don't care to because the water freaks me out. And something deep that I've always suspected is I think I might have drowned in a past life, and that's why water's always flipped me out. Like, I have such a weird fear of the water that when I went to Puerto Vallarta last month, I took strides in breaking because I went into the ocean off of a boat for the very first time. So that was part of me taking back my power. Yeah, I'm going to get over it. It just takes more exposure. I think also being around the ocean more.
Yeah, for sure. Just building on what you said, a yes and to that is what, the freedom that's represented in them just floating in the ocean, learning how to swim, having the space to be people and do that sort of thing, and the beauty that represents. It's a top moment in the film for sure, without a doubt.
Yeah.
So we get somewhere before the close of this first act, we also get a scene of Chiron and his best friend Kevin walking together in a field, and I think the bullies are somewhere around, and Kevin essentially is like looking at a cut on Chiron's face and being like, you need to show these guys that you aren't soft. And he's like, I'm not soft, I'm tough. And they have a little wrestling match. And I watched this with Erin, and I kind of leaned over to her and I was like, I can't wait till we get the sex scene with them like this. And I wasn't 100% wrong. We'll get to it. But it was a very beautiful representation of boy friendship. And then at this point, you also know that this is him having feelings for another boy in one way. And the one boy who seems to also treat him like a person, not like he's any other lesser version of the other people that torment his life. And then at the end of their wrestling match, which I also think this is just so many just real representations of humanity. They stop wrestling. He goes, yeah, I knew you weren't soft. And then they start walking away together. And all of a sudden, one of them starts sprinting and the other one sprints after him. I thought that was perfect. Just perfect capturing of life.
I agree.
What do you think?
I agree. I mean, I remember a moment that I had like that as a kid. Actually, two moments I had like that. Once in elementary school and one in middle school. And both were kind of me waking up to my identity a little bit more. So those scenes felt really, really specific to me, but also real.
Moving on in this first act, we get one fateful night where Chiron comes home to his mother hanging in his kitchen with a mysterious man. She tells him to make himself scarce and they disappear. Later on in that evening, Juan encounters someone smoking up on their selling turf, which is strictly against the rules, and he's pissed at his corner guy for letting it happen. And as he walks up to the car to tell them to skedaddle out of there, it turns out to be his mom smoking the crack with that man in the driver's seat. And Juan berates her for being addicted to crack and for neglecting his son, but she rebukes him, being like, you're going to sell it to me. And he's not arguing with that. He's going to sell it to her because he's about making that money. She also implies that she can tell that her son is gay and she knows why he's getting tormented by all of his peers. And they argue over who's going to kind of be the one bringing him up, where she's like, yeah, you might be acting like his father, but I'm his flesh and blood. I'm his mom. And that's always going to be a thing, before she goes home and you get this super haunting scene of her just screaming at Chiron. So that's a traumatic moment in this little kid's life, and a heartbreaking moment in the film in general, that you kind of see how all of these threads are connected in that one moment where you didn't necessarily see them all connecting until right then. You just thought it was people that just happened to run into each other.
For sure. I think that scene where she says, oh, you're going to raise my son, I think that they are both right about something. But one thing, I'm going to say this before I lose the thought, although she is clued into the fact that she has a gay, queer, however you want to label him, son, and her saying that that's why he's getting picked on, I don't think that that's necessarily true. At least that's not my interpretation of it. I think that he is getting picked on because he doesn't talk and because he doesn't take up space. And that because if you really break down the word queer, it means different. So him acting in a way that could make him pass as just a mute or somebody who might be a little bit intellectually different than other people, I think that is more them just not being able to really get a read on what his deal is. But we know that in the 80s and 90s, if you couldn't get a read on somebody or if it was weird, it just got labeled gay. So I think that at least that's my creative intellectual breakdown of how he got put into that box. I don't think that the kids are thinking of him that deeply. I think that his mom sees him because that's his mom, but the way that she goes into, oh, and that's why kids pick on him, I think that's just showing her fucking homophobia in all of her imperialistic.
Referencing how he walks.
It's like, whatever. Let him walk however he wants to walk. I think it's just, he's also not holding his head high. You know, he isn't proud of himself because you aren't emotionally present. I found that moment very, very interesting. When I would spend time with my male cousins, when we were around Chiron's age, we would walk around in our aunt's heels just for fun. And she would watch us and she'd be like, oh, that's so funny. No, you walk around. And because we were 5 and 6 years old, was there ever a moment where you did that as a kid that you can remember just to be silly?
You know, no, honestly. I don't even think there was any, like, I wouldn't have not thought about it. I just never, I'm trying to think. I don't think my mom really like had heels now that I'm thinking about it. I'm trying to think of my mom ever being in heels or any of my aunts for that matter. I like can't think of one time. Maybe that's more of a family issue than didn't have the materials. But no, it's so funny. All that stuff happened more for me in college because I went to a place like Emerson where that was like, let's go to the garment district and try on as much weird shit as possible. And one of the favorite pieces of clothing I ever put on was my buddy Matt's skirt. It was great. So that was more of a college age thing for me than a 5-year-old thing for me.
I own 3 or 4 skirts now that are just hanging in the closet that are like for different aesthetic purposes. But yeah, skirts are hot, particularly on dudes because you know what's underneath.
Skirts are hot.
It's fun, but I digress.
Well, this is where we have same but different of an opinion. If you get my drift, same, but different results.
I got you.
But I agree
with you too, just
in
a different way.
I love it. So to lock back into seriousness, the next day, Chiron is having dinner with Juan and Teresa over at Teresa's house, and he admits that he hates his mother, and he asks them both what an F slur is. And if you're listening to this podcast enough, you know that we don't mean fuck, we say fuck. And Juan tells him that it is a word used to make gay people feel bad, which I think is actually a very succinct way of putting it to a child who is hearing it thrown his way over and over again. And he also tells him that there's nothing wrong with being gay and that he shouldn't allow others to mock him. And there was that funny little moment where he was tried to be helpful and being like, is it bad that I'm this word? Or is basically he was asking if there's any virtue in being called the word. And he was almost like, unless you want there to be. And then Janelle's like, no, don't. It's a good try, but don't. Just stick with the no. And we both giggled at that, which I just think, again, it's just such a real moment of somebody trying their best. And it's okay if you slip a tiny bit. And it's really great that he has Teresa to get him back on the track. But like, again, what a beautiful father moment from someone who didn't think he was going to be a father to a child, now feels this immense responsibility to him now that you have all this context for who he is. And just like, what a way to step up. I just think it was such a good way to step up.
Yes, and to that scene. I like that, again, this movie deviates from expectations that you would have about black men. This is a black man, yes, but he's from Cuba. He's a drug dealer, but he can also be tremendously gentle and generous and attentive and giving. He does care about this kid. And I love that you have a drug dealer who doesn't think that being gay is a bad thing. During the crack epidemic, I have never seen that in a movie. I thought that was so groundbreaking. I'm almost a little jealous because I wish that I would have had a man in my life who, when I was that age, who might have seen me and said, there's nothing wrong with you being who you are and walking in your truth. That would have been game-changing, though I wouldn't change anything because I am the person that I am because of what happened. But that would have been really nice. That would have been really, really nice. And it's so funny to hear somebody talk about the F slur as something to make gay people feel bad, because I feel about the F slur the same way that I feel about the N word, which is that they're both my words. And if I am in the company of people in those communities, they can fly free, but don't get caught outside the community saying it, because then we're going to have a fucking problem. But yeah, that was a great scene.
Everybody write that down. Everybody. I don't care who you are. Just write it down. You need it. Wisdom from Charlie. That one's for free. Before we close, and this is literally the last scene that we get before we move into the second act, at that table, after they have that discussion about the F slur that was being used his way, he asks Juan if he does sell drugs and whether or not his mother does drugs. And Juan remorsefully answers yes to both questions. Chiron just silently gets up and leaves, and we get this slow fade out as Juan hangs his head and slowly breaks down in shame, which was, I mean, talk about watching truth watch over a person and how they deal with it. I think probably these 15 seconds maybe won him the Oscar alone, although the performance itself was brilliant from start to finish. And the only complaint that I have is this is the last time that we see him for the rest of the movie.
He fucking lives in Chiron.
That's, yes. I mean, he basically becomes him.
Some alterations, because I think that he acts harder just because of being gay. He feels like he has to put it on a little bit extra. There's a scene on the couch in his apartment that I really can't wait to talk about. Because
you just made me think about that when you said that.
On the edge of my seat, like, oh shit, this guy's a shark. But seeing him do a version of mentorship for somebody else in that moment with a harder edge later on, we'll get to it. Let's move on. So now we are in chapter 2, baby. We open up on a teenage version of Chiron. He is balancing avoiding a school bully and spending time with Teresa, who has lived alone since Juan's death. Paula, who has turned to prostitution due to her worsening addiction, forces Chiron to give her the money he receives from Teresa. Let's stop and double click on this for a second. When she ran up to Chiron before she revealed that she had been locked out of their apartment, I believed it was pure. And she was just like, oh, hey, what's up? But then the suspicion on his face, and then the reveal that she needed to get inside the house to find money so that she can buy herself drugs because she's prostituting herself out to support this addiction was a gut punch. She's so good. I really want her to win an Oscar. Angela Bassett deserved that Oscar, and she got it. Also, I really want her to get this Oscar because she's been killing it for as long as I've been alive.
And she did catch the nomination for this movie, just on the W.
That's amazing. See, I don't remember that because I wasn't up on nominations as much as I am now back then.
Oh, I only know because I looked it up yesterday. So, how do you feel about the fact that they never explained what happened to Juan?
I don't think we need to. He died.
No? Just he died?
It's sad.
And it's sad.
It could be a drive-by. It could be an aneurysm. It could be he fell in the shower and hit his head. Awkward. I like that it's not there, but the loss is felt. Chiron feels a lot more lonely. Like, his loneliness feels more heartbreaking now because I think that he, as a teenager, is just a raw version of himself.
Yeah, I mean, he has, you think of all that guidance he could have been getting right now, especially as we go through the events that we're about to sort of roll through.
This bully, let's talk about this bully for a second. I At first, when I was watching this, I think that this bully is getting his ass beat at home and is coming to school and taking it out on everybody.
My headcanon that it was one of the kids that was chasing him into the crack house in the beginning.
And just keeps victimizing him for that many years. That's wild.
It's kind of how it goes. I mean, once a bully, always a bully until you can finally get away from him. The same people that are a thorn in people's sides in elementary school are definitely going to be the same people that are thorns in your side in high school.
I never experienced having the same people go from elementary to middle school to high school with me, because I did go into a city and you had to audition for those certain schools or pass a test or win a lottery for some of them. That's how it worked in New York City in the late 90s. Yeah, natural
separation.
It was rare. I felt excited if somebody followed me. It's like, oh, I know somebody here. But Cody, my boyfriend, he said that he stayed with some people from like K all the way up to 12. That would have been a nightmare.
Yeah, I moved when I was 8. But yeah, some people I literally 3rd grade to graduating high school.
No, I don't want it. This isn't what I ordered. Send it back to the kitchen. Chiron's childhood friend Kevin tells him about a detention he received for being caught having sex with a girl in a school stairwell. Chiron later dreams about Kevin and the girl having sex in Teresa's backyard, waking with the start.
Do you think Kevin's telling him the truth?
Yes. He might be embellishing, but I think it's a version of the truth.
All right. I agree that he was embellishing. I don't know if I think maybe just tried to like appear more. This could be an incorrect assumption, but because I think some version of Kevin is closeted as well, he's trying to up his masculinity to someone that I think he also has feelings for, because he doesn't know about that person. And it's very, honestly, if we're going to talk about, I can't believe I'm going to reference X-Men 97 right now, but it's a little bit like that bar conversation at the finale of X-Men 97 where they're talking about being mutants, where it's like they're testing the waters a little bit. Maybe they're not. They're still got their walls up. So him talking about it so enthusiastically and so detailed made me think like, oh, this dude's totally lying. He's just trying to like show off for someone that he actually likes.
I don't know if he's aware that he's doing this because he is young, but I think on a subconscious level, he's also trying to turn him on and put a very sexual thought about him in his head. Because whenever you're very explicit,
it works.
Something you've done and you kind of push it into somebody's head, they're going to start thinking of you as a sexual creature, you know, and it wasn't until then that he then had that dream about that. So I think whether or not he was aware of it, that was his intention of like, I want you to see me this way because I'm curious about you.
Mm-hmm. I love it.
I also love how beautifully this next scene was shot. One night, Kevin visits Chiron at the beach near his house. While smoking a blunt together, the two discuss their ambitions and the nickname Kevin gave Chiron when they were children. They kiss, and Kevin gives Chiron a hand job. I like this sex scene, and I talk about this a lot as it pertains to writing. I don't like sex scenes that are gratuitous and just there to be there. I think they're obnoxious, and I think that they put the actors in a very strange position with each other. I'm glad that intimacy coordinators are a thing on sets right now, because sex scenes in movies shouldn't feel like sex work. Those are two very different things, and I think that sex work is very legitimate, and like work is literally in the name of it. So that is your trade, and it's legitimate, and you're not less of a person for doing that. But when you are an actor playing a role, I think that there should be boundaries of what you are expected to do in front of an entire set of people. And I applaud this film because I'll start with the writing. The sex came after the intimacy. They had I think that this is the most deep conversation, the most open that Chiron is for the rest of the movie. Him saying, sometimes I cry so much, I think I'm going to start turning into drops. And I love that his boyfriend looks at him and takes that in and doesn't make fun of him and just appreciates him even more, because that's intimacy and vulnerability. I thought that was very, very beautiful and very sweet. And if a guy that I had a crush on told me that, I would just be like, come here, which he does. And then when they made out, it felt earned, and I was invested in their connection. And then just from a stylistic standpoint, when he was getting a hand job, I love the shots of just his hands in the sand with the grains, and also the back of his head being held.
It was beautiful.
You know, just showing that it was a very intimate moment and that he wasn't being used. They were being connected. They were connecting with each other. What did you think?
The only thing I want to back up a little bit farther is just the conversation they have about the breeze and how it makes them feel free and all of that stuff. Although my only slight nitpick is how the hell did he find him? It was a little convenient that he just suddenly found him on the beach, because right before that he was riding the train for hours until it closed. So it theoretically was like past midnight and he just found him on the beach. But we don't have to think about that too hard, because everything else that happened afterwards was like, it almost made me think he was having it in his, like he was having the conversation in his brain for a second until he pulled out the blunt and they started smoking it. And I was like, oh no, this is real. But after I got back into it, it was really great.
For sure. I thought that was really fun. Just also maybe he was stalking him and just what he was up to, and conveniently was like, oh, hi. I would pay you to be here.
What are you doing here?
No. The next morning, Tyrell manipulates Kevin into participating in a hazing ritual. Kevin reluctantly punches Chiron until he cannot stand, watching as Tyrell and the other boys savagely attack him. When the principal urges him to reveal his attacker's identity, Chiron refuses, saying that reporting them will not solve anything. Working backwards from this, the shot of him just sticking his face inside of ice water in the sink was so powerful, because whenever he's alone or whenever he's near water, he is experiencing an emotional transition. The scene with Juan, where Juan was just holding him in the ocean, was showing that this was going to be a paternal figure for him and somebody who meant a lot to him and was seeing it the first time. Him taking a bath while he was alone at home. One, he's a total latchkey kid, which I thought, wow, I don't know if a kid in this day and age would be left home to that extent to just fend for themselves, just with helicopter parenting or whatever. But him taking the water and getting the bubbles and giving himself a bath just shows that he really is fending for himself. But the transformation,
the dish soap for the tub,
I remember that. Mr. Bubbles.
Brilliant.
Mr. Bubbles. Bubba. So that was great. But then can we just talk about this moment of Kevin hitting him? Did that break your fucking heart like it broke mine?
It's the bad kind of watching a train wreck in slow motion that you can't stop, where like you see him essentially be like, this is a sink or swim moment for me. I'm either going to keep my social standing or I'm going to start becoming bullied like Chiron is, and it's going to hurt. And so I have to decide what's going to hurt less. And he decided in that moment that losing his boyfriend is going to hurt less, which arguable, but that's the choice that he made.
Yeah, arguable. That's very legit. That's very real. That was the least painful decision for him to make. I mean, you could see in his face where he said, don't get back up. But then for them to, after that, just like start kicking him was so, jeez. Oh man, but I want to hurry up and get to this next scene just because I want to talk about it. The next day, an enraged Chiron walks into class and smashes a chair over Tyrell's head before being restrained by classmates and a teacher. Chiron is arrested and leaves the school in a police cruiser while Kevin watches. Yeah, that dude deserved that beating. He deserved it. Yeah. He had it coming.
Had it coming. Yeah, it's funny. As we were on that tracking shot of watching Chiron walk into the school and stuff like that, first, I know it's inappropriate to be thinking of an Eminem song in a movie like this, but that's the song The Way I Am, where the line specifically, when a dude's getting bullied and shoots up a school, it was very much giving that vibe of like, this is someone who clearly has been broken by what has happened, and it was certainly the final straw to have someone that he just had this beautiful humanizing moment with then turn around and physically abuse him and assault him. Yeah, I wasn't necessarily expecting him to like pick up the chair and go full WWE on him. And even after he hits him with the first one, where he takes a different piece of it and just starts smacking him with it, like That's pure
blind
rage.
Like, let's go through a laundry list of everything this kid's been through. We don't know what happened with his father, because in the beginning of the movie, when his dad got brought up, he didn't say shit. So I bet that his dad was severely homophobic and just a terrible person and talk shit to the mom about him. Chased by kids and had to hide in a crack house. Watches his mom succumb to crack addiction. Has a father figure in Juan, but Juan dies, we don't know how. Has this connection with Kevin while he's figuring himself out. Then Kevin punches him, which sends the message that he's being punished for having a moment of intimacy with another boy. So that's a mindfuck. And I think that's also why he didn't let anybody else touch him after that, because of the messaging that sends. Oh, I'm going to give you pleasure and I'm going to kiss you and hold space for you. Then I'm going to beat the shit out of you. I don't know how I would have functioned after something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we sort of see some of the results of that going into the third act of the film, titled Black, where a year and a decade later, 11 years for those of you that are bad at counting, now going by the nickname Black, an adult Chiron deals drugs in Atlanta. And just to pause right here, he just becomes a spitting image of Juan in a lot of ways here, where he's jacked, he works out really hard, and he's super muscular. He wears a lot of the same clothing that Chiron does. He has grills too, so he even starts wearing grills like Juan did, and he, as you can see, is in the trapping game, as they call it, the drug dealing game, now just in the Atlanta area of Georgia rather than that area of Miami. He's receiving frequent calls from his mother, Paula, who wants him to visit her at a drug treatment center where she is living. So I guess something that he did with all that money was get his mom into some help, maybe. And one morning, Kevin, of all people, calls him and invites him to come and see him should he ever find himself in Miami again. Now, Charlie, what did you think of this phone call and the way that Chiron, Black, whatever you want to call him, reacted to?
He felt total chills, because I think that he has thought about this dude so much throughout the last 11 years. So particularly because this is the only man that he's let get that close to him. So he has it's kind of like a first love, the way that a first love would have you in a chokehold, you know?
I also know that the last thing that they did was punch the other person in the face. Is this just like a time has passed and I'm only going to remember the fondness? Because they never talk about it.
After he
really
apologizes for it. And I think he also gets it, as fucked up as it was. He gets why he had to do that. I think him standing up in this moment of stinging defiance while he was told to stay out was just him showing, you're doing what you have to do and I'm doing what I have to do right now. So I think
I like that.
He understood, and I think that he wasn't pissed at him per se for being forced to, but it still crossed wires with a lot of his internalized homophobia and shame. I think in his head he was listening to, I think Juan was in him in that scene when he was getting punched, because Juan said, it's fine being gay, but you don't ever have to let anybody treat you like an F slur. So I think that's what was playing in his head. It's like, all right, you're not going to treat me like something you can just walk all over, which was very real.
I totally agree. So before we get to sort of Chiron's two final trips of, I don't know, closure, healing, or the right words, but I think we get some semblance of both of those words throughout some of the ending of this movie. But I want to talk about another parallel that he holds here with Juan, which is when he's counting money with one of his corner dealers as someone who's in the Juan role now, and sort of how he fucks with him a little bit and then turns it around to be like, hey, you can't be on the corner if you're going to just freak out if a random person starts messing with you, which was his own backwards way of giving this kid a life lesson and taking a little bit of a mentorship role with him.
Just watching it, I was like, damn, that's intimidating. Also, I kind of want to have sex with him now. Yeah, it was like a bit of both, governor. That was a very interesting scene. Though I don't know if Juan would have gone quite as hard with that lesson. Juan seemed a bit smoother to me.
Maybe. It's good to... I think it's because he was dealing with the kid. I don't think we ever saw him... We didn't see him have to deal with his corner guy in a negative way. His corner guy always seemed to be on point and so he never had to have an issue. But you saw him activate when he was going to deal with Paula and the other guy in the car. I think he had it in him.
He did.
I think he understood, because he's essentially telling this kid to be tough, which is essentially what Juan told him to do. He did it softer because he was dealing with a child versus an adult. But I get it. We go for visit 1 of 2 before Chiron goes and visits Kevin, which you can clearly tell he's going to go and do after this phone call happens, and that Kevin wants him to do, because this is still the time where it's hard to find somebody's phone number. You have to jump through hoops to find somebody's phone number or get in touch with them. You can't just find them on Instagram and DM them at this period of time. And so before he goes down to Miami, he goes to see his mother at the drug rehab facility, drug treatment center where she's residing. And Chiron finally breaks his silence about what life was like for him and what it was like growing up in that house with him. And it's that moment where we see that she screams at him, "Don't look at me," back in the flashback to his childhood when she came home from that first interaction between her and Juan. And his mother takes the opportunity to apologize for not loving him when he needed it the most, and that she loves him now, even if he doesn't love her back. And they're able to tearfully reconcile before Paula lets Chiron go and lets him know that she's going to be living there for a while and trying to give back to the place that helped get her life back on track. So you sort of get a moment of healing and a moment of resolution between him and his mother. Whether or not it's a huge sweeping one is up in the air, but I think just the fact that conversation can happen now is a huge step in his life.
The fact that she has the wherewithal to have that conversation. And I love that he sits back down when she wants to continue the conversation. He could have just walked away. And again, Juan is alive because he said hated his mom while she was alive, but now that she's dead, he misses the hell out of her. So that's something that he probably kept with him and carried for years and years.
True. And that's also another testament to Mahershala's performance there, is that you feel his character stick with you for the rest of that movie too, along with Chiron, which I think is really special. So Chiron travels to Miami and visits Kevin at his workplace. He's working as a cook at a diner. He cooks him dinner. They hug, they catch up, they share plastic cup wine, which was really cute. And Kevin's trying to probe Chiron about his life, and he's not really getting much in return. So Kevin decides to tell him that he's had a child with an ex-girlfriend of his, and although the relationship's over, he's fulfilled as being a father. And then Chiron reciprocates by talking about how he eventually found a path into drug dealing through his time in juvie and all of the systems and stuff like that. And he asks Kevin why he called. This is another amazing needle drop moment where Kevin walks up into the jukebox and he plays Hello Stranger by Barbara Lewis, a song that makes him think of Chiron. And I think it's just an indication that, this was someone that he wished he could have explored a further relationship, but it is really now just a stranger in his life, and that he's happy to be seeing him again, and that he wants that stranger to be back in his life in some capacity. What do you think about this diner scene in general?
I actually want to talk about the blocking, because every time Kevin gets up and comes back, the energy of the scene changes. And they kind of, that's what you would call in writing a beat chain. I appreciate the directing in that, showing that he still has busy work and that this is a life that he's made for himself. He stops by a table of a regular to check in on them. You can see him just thriving in what he's doing right now, which is very important. I like that he is in his own way honest about missing Chiron. He doesn't say the words, but whenever anyone says, I think a different way of saying I love you is this made me think of you.
And break down the moments of him cooking the meal for Chiron too, because I think that there's extra attention paid to the care that he's putting into preparation of diner food, which you wouldn't expect to be fancy most of the time.
He's special. He's saying everything he can't say with the food, and just the way to any person's heart, not just a man's heart, is through the stomach. Because if you eat somebody's food, you are being taken care of by them, and you think of them differently after that. It's a different level of a relationship. So I think that was really great. And the director just blew it out of the water. Barry Jenkins is so fucking amazing.
Agree. Between the blocking and the way that it was shot and the music, I think a lot was being said without being said here. And if you have a keen eye for that sort of thing, you can kind of catch all of the the care that Kevin still holds for Chiron and that he's able to start sharing it with him again, which is a super beautiful scene. And after the two have dinner, the two of them go back to Kevin's apartment. And Kevin tells Chiron that although his life didn't turn out as he had hoped or expected, that he's happy, which results in Chiron breaking down and admitting to him that he hasn't been intimate with anybody or been touched by anybody since their encounter years ago. And we kind of just silently transition into Kevin comforting him and holding him close. And Chiron remembers himself as little, standing on the beach next to the ocean as a blue boy in the moonlight. And that's how we end. Charlie, how did you like how this movie ended?
His inner child looked back at him. Like, I think his adult self and his inner child connecting is a lot of, the point of that. I thought it was beautiful, and I like that it didn't end on a sex scene with them. I like that it just ended with him being held. It's very intimate. I also like to think that showing a black man being held in that way is a form of rebellion, because black men receiving tenderness from other black men in a non-sexual way is something that we never see.
I love that. I think especially for the journey that we go on with Chiron, just that moment of being held and protected is kind of where we wanted to be the whole time. And we had so many opportunities where he came really, really close or had a glimpse of it. And this feels like the first time where he feels like it's finally been embraced and is potentially sustainable. And it sort of gives you sort of a tenor of hope as you fade out. And so you can walk away with that hope rather than anything else.
For sure. Completely agree. Couldn't agree more.
Charlie, do you have anything else you want to share about characters, plot beats, any just like takes you want to rattle off about this film?
This motivates me as a filmmaker to make things that speak more to my community in this way, because there are so many things about this film and the way that it's shot, the way that it's put together. God, the thing I'm most impressed by is the directing. It's so art house. It's such a art house film. It's so indie, and I feel like black people in cinema, we don't get to be treated this way cinematically. We don't get to be lit this way. We're usually not lit properly. If we go into more of the impoverished neighborhoods of the black community, the movie has to look and feel and move a certain way, and this movie didn't do that. I think I tend to just not want to see movies about neighborhoods like that with people who look like me, because we get so much of it. And it seems that white audiences think, oh yeah, that's just the default. I really love that we got to live in that reality, but it was done with intentionality and love and deviating from stereotypes while deepening some stereotypes and adding layers to why certain people would be the way that they are, but still making a strong case for why their humanity deserves to not only be portrayed in such a loving, kind way, but also to be, ruminated upon a bit more. That's all I have to say. I'm ready to move on to our ratings. If you are, this was a great movie.
I love it. It was a great movie, and I just want to thank you for sharing all that you have and holding space for all this stuff on this podcast. So it's super special that I get to do this with you. So thanks for being you, man. So let's go into our final ratings. We're going to go ahead and ride the surf for this one and do this out of 5 waves. So Charlie, out of 5 waves, what would you rate?
5 waves. 5 almost isn't enough. If we didn't have to do a graphic for this, I'd be a tsunami. This is
the 7 out of 5. Yeah. What's it? This is a doggest 15 out of 10.
The rating didn't match. I'd be like, Steve, what the fuck's wrong with you? Give it 5.
This is the 5-iest 5 I've ever 5'd so far.
The most fabulous.
The 5-iest of the 5s. Yeah. This is head and shoulders the best movie we've covered on this podcast. This is the best thing we've covered on this podcast, period.
Try to cover more shit like this. It's just
all of the above.
So beautiful.
Absolutely.
This film made me tear up multiple times. X-Men 97 made me tear up a couple of times too. Mostly the Mostly the rogues.
Different tiers, for sure.
Rogue stuff did. But yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful work.
Well, hey, more stuff like this for sure. It was an honor to speak about it with you. It's going to do it for this episode of Charlie and Steve Watch Stuff. We were here to give you our Moonlight takes. Next week, we're going to be back keeping rolling with our Pride-focused movie month is something that I'm coming up for this term right now. And so we're going to look forward to seeing you on the next one. Be sure to follow this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. If you haven't already, tossing us a 5-star review would be amazing. Helps more people find the podcast out there. So if you're on Spotify, if you're on Apple Podcasts, if you're on any other sort of podcast platform, toss us that review if you haven't already. If you're watching us on YouTube, also, hi, hello, I just waved at you because we're watching on YouTube. We have a YouTube now, if you didn't know that. So if you want to peep our beautiful faces, check out Charlie and Steve Watch Stuff on YouTube. Hit a little subscribe on that one. Toss the video a like. And of course, follow us on Instagram. It's at Charlie and Steve Watch Stuff Pod to give us your wave ratings or ratings for anything that we've covered, because we always post on there as well. So for myself, Steve Selnick, and my good friend Charlie Peppers, we will look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks, everybody. Bye.